The U.S. Capitol, where politicians from all around the world meet to rip America off. Pursue the people's best interests. They have done this since the founding of our nation's history. Well, they couldn't really fulfill one of their duties, that is, certifying an election, because of a riot on January 6th, 2021. Yeah, it was pretty rough. But what if I told you that this day, while bad, could have been far, far worse and far more consequential for our nation's history? Because you see, this wasn't just a brainless mob of people storming the Capitol just to, like, be rough and rowdy and all this. No, this mob of people had a very, very clear goal. This goal was to overturn the 2020 election, in which, if you didn't know, Trump faced off against Joe Biden for Trump's second term re-election. He lost to Joe Biden, and he claimed widespread election fraud, which is total bullshit. And a lot of his supporters believed him, and they, in response, a ton of them gathered at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, the day they were supposed to certify the election, and they stormed into the Capitol building. And thankfully, the National Guard showed up in time to kick the rioters out of the building, and they were unable to harm or kill any politicians, even though they definitely planned to. So, had the mob succeeded in their goal, how would America be different? What would change? Well, it's very unlikely that just them occupying the Capitol building and killing a lot of Congress, and Congress unable to fulfill their duty, would really. It would definitely put a roadblock in the election process, possibly even making sure that, like, maybe, like, the president won't get inaugurated on January 20th, and for a little bit longer, Trump will still be president. However, something's going to happen. Either they launch a military raid of the Capitol and get all the protesters out, no matter how many politicians die, or they'd figure something out, and eventually Trump would be forced out of office. Or when, everything settles down, if he refuses to leave office, he would just be impeached. But in this scenario, it's going to be a little bit different. So, it's mostly going to start the same way. Donald Trump starts his whole election was stolen, election was rigged BS. But, let's say in this scenario, he's going to be a little bit more aggressive about it and, doubling down on it. He's going to do a lot less sugarcoating of stuff. And this is going to get his supporters even more riled up. And it's going to lead to more people inevitably showing up on January 6th. Basically saying he played the propaganda war a lot better in this timeline. In this scenario, the Trump January 6th speech is a lot more, it sends a lot stronger of a message to his supporters in this alternate speech than his one in real life. He does not use words like peacefully and patriotically protest. He does not use words like that. He says point blank that we need to take our nation back in blood, and he says stuff like real patriots fight, and they fight to the death. These would all be alternate quotes from President Trump in this speech that he is giving, which obviously would get his supporters fired up. But real quick, let's talk about this guy. So this guy is the leader of a right-wing paramilitary group called the Proud Boys. Well, I believe he was actually like detained or arrested or something like that a couple days before January 6th. He was not present on that day. Well, let's just assume in this alternate scenario that he is in fact present on January 6th, meaning that he will be leading a group of right-wing paramilitary groups into the Capitol. It will be a lot more like well thought, well carried out, full on strategic attack on the Capitol instead of just a bunch of angry Trump supporters rushing in there with no real battle plan. Also remember this guy, the leader of the Oath Keepers. Yeah, he's there too. So the day begins and the mob breaks into the Capitol. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more people there, and there's going to be a lot more well trained professionals there to kind of help guide the mob and cut off exit routes, stuff like that. That way, there is no escape from the U.S. Capitol. They could go in bunkers, they could try and hide somewhere, but in terms of leaving the building, that is just impossible. The riots escalate a lot quicker in this timeline than they would in the real timeline, just because, again, of Donald Trump not sugarcoating anything in his speech and not using those, sugar-coated words like peacefully and patriotically. He knows what he wants his supporters to do, and he wants to get the message through to them. So, he does not use those sugar-coated words, and instead tells them, yeah, go in there, do your stuff. And they go in there, and they do their stuff. They destroy a lot of property around the U.S. Capitol, and after, maybe 30 minutes of the riot happening, they're officially inside the building. So now these guys are inside the building, and the politicians try to escape, only to figure out, oh crap, exit routes are blocked off. Well, we're screwed. So at this point, politicians are like taking cover behind chairs, stuff like that. Secret Service is at the door. Maybe not Secret Service, but like whoever's in charge of protecting these guys is just at the door, ready to fire on anyone that they see. And in this scenario, obviously, they're going to bring handguns and more weaponry than just, your average like pepper spray or baseball bats. They're going to bring like some fairly useful weapons. So they will be able to get into a firefight with some of these Secret Service members, taking them out, and they will be able to break into the Senate chambers. Now, the rioters' main goal, breaking into the Senate, is to capture this guy right here, Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. So they break into the Senate chambers. They don't kill him immediately. They take him hostage so they can leverage the situation to hopefully get more out of it. Maybe compromise a deal that allows Donald Trump to be president for 4 more years, because obviously this is their ultimate goal. Now remember, at the actual event, they had like gallows and stuff set up to hang people like Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. Of course, thankfully, they never ended up following through with this. However, it is expected that these gallows would be used in this scenario, in which the mob actually got what they wanted. That the gallows would be used, maybe not specifically on Pence and Pelosi, but on some other politicians that aren't really that important, that they don't really care about all that much. They would put on these gallows and threaten to do so with others. And very shortly after the mob breaks into the Senate chambers, they also break into the House chambers. Here they will find people like Nancy Pelosi and, other Democrats that were serving in the House of Representatives. I'm not really sure on specifics around this time. Maybe AOC is there, but I don't know. Well, their main target in the House, obviously, is going to be House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And the mob is going to get a hold of her. And since the leader of the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers is not there, somebody is going to Yeah, that wasn't great. Also, there's now smoke coming from the Capitol. Wonder what could be causing that. Maybe it's like a bunch of sprays. Maybe it's like from guns going off. What could be causing? Well, that's a predicament. Yes, in this alternate scenario, somehow, somewhere, some way, a massive fire breaks out somewhere in the Capitol building. It's not great. It's very uncool. All right. A lot of the rioters escaped the Capitol building in time. It's not known if one of the supporters set this fire on purpose. What is known is that every single politician in the Capitol building at this time is dead. All 100 senators, all 435, I believe, House members, Vice President Pence, Speaker Pelosi, all gone. And this is just not good because now there is no legislative branch of the United States. It's just taken out. So checks and balances really can't work. And if maybe you do know this, maybe you don't, presidency has a check on the judicial branch. Not great. Really, really, really not great. So, with this happening, and with the Supreme Court already being in Trump's hands, he is basically the king now. He is basically the guy. And now we have to talk about Kamala Harris. Obviously, she was a senator from California at the time this happened, and she would be one of the politicians that died in this alternate scenario during the fires. So she's done, which means Joe Biden, one, has to pick a new running mate, and two, needs to figure out what on God's green earth he's going to do with his life. All eyes right now are all on Sleepy Joe. He's going to try and do something. He's going to make a public speech about, how Donald Trump has essentially become a dictator and all this. So everyone is now eagerly awaiting for the president's response. I mean, obviously, legislative branch has been completely eliminated. The president has to say something. The nation awaits a response from their president. And he takes a very long time to respond to the crisis. He does make a tweet saying he will respond with a speech shortly. Then that is 1 hour ago, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. By the time it hits 4 hours ago, everyone's like, okay, this man is not going to speak today. Until at approximately 9:36 p.m. Eastern Time, he finally does. He exits the White House and steps onto the White House lawn and gives a speech about how the proud American patriots stood up for freedom and how they were able to successfully overturn the 2020 election. And that Donald Trump has been reelected, basically declares himself the winner of the 2020 election again, and declares that he has been reelected president. So obviously, this is not going to fly with a lot of the nation. Donald Trump also says that he is declaring martial law due to the deaths of the senators and representatives. So not only has Donald Trump essentially said that he has been reelected, he has also said he's declaring martial law. So how does the nation respond? Yeah, that sounds just about right. So, understandably so, people are furious. They are angry. They are tired of this crap. So, yeah, fires are set and it is not pretty. Riots all over the nation. And some of the governors of certain states are going to be very unhappy about this. They believe that Donald Trump has basically just become Caesar. And they are not finna stand with it. Especially Joe Biden. And through all the chaos, the European Union decides to drop a response in the American, electoral system. They decide to respond recognizing the Biden government as the legitimate government of the United States, saying that if it came down to a civil war, they would not refrain from sending arms and munitions to the Biden forces. And this is obviously going to tick Trump right off. So, because of this, Donald Trump's America is going to sever ties with the EU. Not only this, he is also going to sign an executive order leaving NATO. Yep, in this timeline, he straight up abandons Europe, leaves NATO, cuts ties with the EU, and starts to move more towards Russia's side of the world, which is not good for any free country. It's obvious that everyone is just like, alright, yeah, America's a de facto dictatorship now, we can't rely on them. And then we get one brave soul by the name of Gavin Newsom. He is the governor of California, and he becomes the first U.S. state to secede from the Union. He declares independence. California, under his leadership, declares independence. He is not going to be the president of this nation. He actually allows Biden to fly into California beforehand, and Biden is appointed the president of this nation, because this is supposed to be the United States that Biden should have rightfully gotten, because, he won the election, but he didn't. So, yeah, California is the first state of many that will follow to secede from the Union in direct defiance of Donald Trump's, Caesarship. And very, very shortly after, Andrew Cuomo of New York will be the second blue state to secede from Trump's America. So at this point, California and New York are so far the only two states to have seceded from Donald Trump's America. Don't worry, many more are going to follow. States in light blue are the states that are pending secession, meaning they have not officially seceded yet, but are in the process of doing so. Some notable states that do this are Illinois, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Washington, Massachusetts, and weirdly, Kentucky. Kentucky is a very weird one, because remember, they do have a Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, and he does decide to secede. Probably going to make a lot of Kentuckians mad, but he does not care. He believes if he is fighting for what he thinks is right, that it's, well, whatever. And interestingly, New Hampshire does not. New Hampshire, they decide to stick with the Trump government for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe they have a Republican governor for some reason. I'm pretty sure they did. If not, they do for this alternate scenario. They elect a Republican governor. Also, I forgot Nevada. Forgot Nevada and Colorado. Both of these states also go. So that is all these states that are pending secession. Very shortly after, all the states finish pending the secessions, and every single state secedes from the Union that is run by a Democratic governor or a Republican governor that just heavily disagrees with Donald Trump's regime. And New Jersey, love of God, that is not New Jersey. New Hampshire is going to get rolled over immediately. New Hampshire is cooked. All right. Same could honestly probably be said for Kentucky on the blue side. Kentucky is surrounded on almost all sides except for their northwestern side, which they border Illinois through. Southern Illinois is still going to be easy to roll through because there's a lot of Republicans there anyway. So, yeah, Kentucky's screwed. Simply put, Kentucky is screwed. The president of this new United States is very obvious. It is going to be Joseph Robinette Biden. He is who many people view to be the legitimate president of the United States. and he will be running all of these blue states that have now seceded from Donald Trump's America. There now officially, in this timeline, exists two United States, one run by Donald Trump, one run by Joe Biden. But another big development, as we know, Biden does not have a vice president in this timeline anymore, so he's going to have to select somebody else to fill in that spot. Who could he pick? Let's see. He's got a couple options. You could go with Gavin Newsom. You could go with Andrew Cuomo. You could go with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. And Joe Biden does, in fact, go with the latter. He does, in fact, pick Wes Moore, Maryland Governor, to be his vice president. Donald Trump is obviously outraged by this. He's seeing all this develop, and he is calling every single governor who led seceding states traitors, and that they would all die a traitor's death once he got his hands back on them. Donald Trump had thought he had won this scenario without, any pushback, but no, he is receiving major pushback, and Donald Trump makes it very clear that he is not going to let this split last long, and that there will be, in fact, a civil war. Also, Donald Trump needs to fill in his vice presidency spot, since, Pence is off. So who is he going to pick to fill in the vice presidency spot? He also has a couple options. He could go with, he could go with any of the Republican governors, really. Probably want to go with some of the more popular ones. Maybe he could go with John Kennedy, a senator from Louisiana. No, John Kennedy's dead. I forgot. Oh. Well, that sucks. Maybe he could go with... I think there's only one real choice here. Donald Trump picks Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to be his vice president. Ron DeSantis has stuck with Trump through thick and thin. Throughout all the troubles Trump's gone through, DeSantis has been there. And DeSantis is making it very clear that Trump will be safe in Mar-a-Lago for as long as he shall live. So, who better to pick for his vice president than Ron DeSantis? So Ron DeSantis is chosen as the vice president. Though Donald Trump does appoint a vice president, well, one, he appointed a vice president that he absolutely knows is going to be by his side no matter what, Donald Trump does not decide to appoint any senators or House representatives. Which, it's whatever. He only controls Republican states right now anyway. So it wouldn't really make a difference at this late of a stage in the game. And the Democratic nation does not do this yet either. So technically, I guess you could say, as of this moment in this alternate scenario, Biden is also kind of a de facto dictator. But he also has the governors of all the states kind of acting as the people to keep him in check, making sure it's at least, somewhat balanced, making sure Biden is not calling all of the shots. And of course, Joe Biden did also appoint a vice president, being Maryland Governor Wes Moore. So there's always that. But now the stage has been set for a brutal civil war that is going to take place in this alternate scenario. Civil war to decide the future of the United States. Will it be a dictatorship? Will it be a free democracy? Who knows? And no one can agree. So we're just going to see how this plays out. A major area of confrontation, just like in the real Civil War, is going to be near D.C. So West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, maybe Ohio. This area, in general, going to see a lot of combat. A lot of combat. The Republicans do push out, already having a clear advantage in this area as the capital was controlled by their militia. Trump controls the army, so he sends those guys in, and they overwhelm the National Guard of Maryland, and are able to push back to a decent proportion. Now, poor old Bashir in Kentucky. Things are really, really not looking good for him here. He is surrounded on all sides, and oh god, yeah, no, they're creeping in. This is really not good. And yep, Bashir has been encircled. This is not great. Closing in, and Bashir's done. Bashir is captured. He is unable to leave the capital of Kentucky, and yeah, let's just say those gallows that were set up outside the capital, in this timeline, they are used. And obviously it is on Bashir, as Donald Trump has said he will use it on any governor in which he is able to capture. And now we go up to Illinois, where there is also some slight invasions, but nothing too major. Hey, Biden's America does get one victory in New Hampshire. I'm not going to call it New Jersey again, for the love of God. New Hampshire is overrun by Biden's forces. Obviously, it's surrounded on all sides. They don't have that strong of a military presence up here. It's really only their National Guard going up against the National Guard of, like, all the New England states. Yeah, New Hampshire was cooked. There was no way they were surviving that. Now we get to New Mexico and Colorado, two states that are going to try and hold their own against, all these Republican states that do surround them. This is going to be a slaughter. And yeah, they are being invaded with great force, and it is really, really not looking good for the governors of these two states. Well, they decide to make a very risky attempt at secretly crossing the borders of Utah and Arizona to get to Nevada and California, where they will hopefully be granted safety for a lot longer. They're hoping for the rest of this war because they're still thinking they can win this thing, which they could. But unfortunately, as they are what they think is secretly flying over rebel territory, an anti-air gun placed in Utah is able to shoot them down, taking out both governors. And it is because of this that both states will collapse. Really, really, really not good. Back in Kentucky for a minute, and they've completely been captured, and an invasion of Illinois is about to happen. Yikes, said Southern Illinois. They are now completely trapped down here. And, yep. Goodbye. Small incursion into Minnesota here. Is now that the Trump's forces are starting to run into a problem. They're having no issue marching through the countrysides of these countries, states of this country. But when it comes to the big cities, they have a lot of trouble. Obviously, because it's not going to support them as much, and the population density is insane, and a lot of the population is fighting back, which is not a great sign. President Trump decides that the best course of action is going to be to try and close as many fronts off as possible. And he believes that the easiest front to close off is going to be the one with Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. So, Operation Detroit is a go, and, it's exactly what it sounds like. Trump's forces pour through the southern border of Michigan and begin making their way north of the country, doing some spearhead tactics here and there when they are able to, as this massive attack of 85, maybe 100,000 soldiers completely catches Michigan off guard, and their military, National Guard, is completely overwhelmed. And they are forced to fall back to Detroit. where a very bloody battle will ensue between the Michigan National Guard and the military. Not to be outdone, the Biden forces are preparing a massive offensive into Ohio to hopefully save the Battle of Detroit. As Biden knows, it will be a very important battle. However, what Biden was not anticipating was a flank from Pennsylvania's south. Donald Trump knew that Joe Biden would be going after Ohio and decided to throw their plans completely out the window with an attack on Pennsylvania. It works, as Biden's forces are completely in disarray now, as they're now moving northeast instead of, maybe towards the northwest where they should be going to Ohio, but no, they're moving up into like New York and stuff. And it is not good. You know what else isn't good? That. And not only was the New Jersey governor captured in this, the New Jersey governor was found and unfortunately offed, but Wes Moore has now retreated to Delaware, of all places, to hide out. And unbeknownst to Donald Trump at the time, this is also where Joe Biden is hiding out. He is hiding out with Vice President Wes Moore in Delaware, which is Biden's home state, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, Biden is now trapped in here, and he knows if he is found, first off, he's done, but more importantly, the cause is done. And he knows that if he is captured, it could be the end of this civil war. So he decides to try and make an escape plan. This line right here is pretty thin, and he believes that if he can't just fight his way through it, he will be able to cross it while there's fighting going on here. Well, it's fine, because the latter happens anyway, and there is a massive, massive counteroffensive over here in the Philadelphia area, which also cuts off a large portion of troops in New Jersey. Now, like I said, their governor has already been taken care of, so it's still going to be rough for New Jersey. However, they are actually able to eliminate all of these soldiers. And this is seen as the Trump forces' first big defeat in this civil war. The tide of war is still very much in his favor, but things are changing. So everywhere, it's mostly a stalemate, with a whole lot of battles going on, not a whole lot of movement. There's obviously a lot of death, a lot of injuries, a lot of destruction. But there is no movement on any of the fronts. And this is really a bad sign for the Trump forces because they are unable to invade anywhere and invade anything, which they need to do if they are to win this civil war. Also, even though Delaware isn't really in the danger zone anymore, Biden and Moore decide to not take any chances, and they move all the way to New York City, where they believe will be pretty safe for a while. But taking a break from the war map, let's look at Truth Social for a bit. So, obviously, the physical war, like the conventional war, is going to be a big factor. But another big factor is going to be the propaganda war. So whoever can get the upper hand in the propaganda war is most likely going to be the de facto winner of the greater Civil War. Well, Donald Trump, having been the president of all of America for, having total control of the entire United States for at least a month before states started, seceding and stuff, he definitely had an upper hand on the propaganda war thing. So, yeah, he's got an upper hand in that regard. And Biden, he can try, but some of that messages have already resonated with a lot of Americans, and it's really not looking good. However, Joe Biden isn't just one to sit down and take a back seat. He has, been able to his message that has stuck, the people it has stuck with, it is stuck with tightly. And people that follow Biden follow him with their lives. They trust him with their lives. So Biden's got a following too. Obviously, he wouldn't have been able to start this whole secession movement if he didn't. He's still very important. His forces are still very powerful and are able to hold the Trump forces at bay, at least for a while. But if Biden really wants to win this war, unfortunately, he's going to have to face the reality that he can't win it on his own. He's going to have to appeal to America's European allies. So Biden tries that. Joe Biden reaches out to the European Union countries, as well as a lot of the other NATO countries that aren't in the European Union. And, a lot of them, some of them decide to send humanitarian aid, but no military aid is being sent yet. Because they bring up the very good point that if they send military aid, that Trump could get his allies in Russia and maybe even North Korea to send military aid to him in hopes that he will, keep ties severed with Europe and move closer towards their sphere of the world. And they don't want to risk starting a world war. So they are only going to send humanitarian aid to the United States. Biden is understandably bummed by this, but he understands. He also really does not want Russia to get involved in this and possibly start a third world war. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is not so careful. He reaches out to Vladimir Putin to try and negotiate a deal that would allow Trump to have some military aid, and Putin gives Donald Trump an offer he simply cannot and will not refuse. Vladimir Putin makes a deal with U.S. President Donald Trump, saying he will give them the Wagner mercenaries. They would send the Wagner mercenary group to the United States to fight alongside Donald Trump if Donald Trump kept his nose out of NATO and basically sided with Russia, pretty much. Started moving closer to Russia's side of the world and cut ties with Europe, and vowed to not protect Ukraine. Donald Trump is reluctant, a little bit. He still somewhat cares about his European allies, but seeing as they are now openly defying him because they're talking to Biden and negotiating stuff with him, Trump sees them as enemies, so is more than happy to accept Putin's offer. So, yes, this does in fact mean that Yevgeny Prigozhin himself is sent to the United States to fight alongside the Donald Trump forces. Prigozhin and most of the Wagner mercenaries are sent to the Pennsylvania front, as this is seen as the most important front in the war, as it is the closest to the capital. And they decide that going north and cutting off this area up here, closest to Detroit, would be their best bet. So they begin the campaign north. And it is very successful at first. They meet some resistance. Then once they get up really north, they meet a lot of resistance. And the Wagner mercenaries do what they do best and completely obliterate them. The advance north continues with little to no resistance, as the troops are now completely cut off, some even encircled. Huge pocket over here is encircled, and they are defeated. So now the Trump soldiers have leaked into New York. This is really not good, and Biden is considering fleeing with Westmore to Boston. And so they get ready to flee to Boston. Well, Wagner decides it's time to get a little cocky. And they are going to shoot all the way from over here in New York to Boston. They're going to try to kind of blitzkrieg the entirety of New York State. And pretty much all of Boston State as well. Not Boston State, Massachusetts State. And they're going to try and capture Biden before he gets to Boston or as he arrives there. So the advance begins, and it's met with heavy resistance. But they go south a little bit. They get to New York City, don't capture it, obviously, because there's a lot of, forces there as Biden's escaping. But then they begin to tail Biden. And Biden sees exactly what is going on and is terrified. He's being tailed by these forces and decides that Boston is not safe. So he starts heading north towards Maine, wherever their capital is. Well, time to go north, Wagner says, as they advance north and manage to cut off the rest of New York State in the process. So this is obviously taking the Biden forces completely by surprise. That's how they're able to do all this crazy stuff. And they probably don't occupy all of this, but, it's just simplicity's sake. It just looks like they occupy all this land, even though they probably really don't. Anyway, Biden's now trapped up here in New England. He cannot escape anywhere. Thankfully, he has the Navy on his side. So, he tries to use that to his advantage, and sails all the way down to about here. Right here, in the middle of the ocean, not too far from the coast of South Carolina, his ship is blown up by some artilleryman or whatever in North Carolina. Just spots him and shoots his ship. And it begins to sink, and both President Biden and Vice President Wes Moore of the Democratic states have been taken care of. They are done. And now, the blue states are in complete disarray as they don't have a leader anymore. And Gavin Newsom decides to make himself the de facto leader of the new nation. Decides to just appoint himself, which is seen as a very controversial move by the people living in the blue states. They're saying stuff like, why would I trade one dictator for this dictator, and all that. So, big mistake, but can't really do anything about it because, again, it's dictator or dictator here. Might as well have a liberal dictator than a conservative one. That is what most of these people are saying. So their spirits are a little demoralized because, they're now fighting for a Newsom dictatorship instead of a Trump one. So they start faltering, but, it's pretty much over at this point. I mean, look at this. I mean, over in the West, they still got a chance, but in terms of achieving total victory, that is pretty much impossible. Until European Union starts saying, you know what, screw it. And they send military aid to the Biden states. Now, Trump states decide to assemble a navy to try and fend off against the Blue Navy. In Virginia, a very strong navy was left, so they use that and decide to try and cut off supply routes. European Union says, joke's on you, we'll just dispense them from Canada. And now an advance north to cut off these supplies begins. So first off, they're going to liberate New Hampshire because yes, and then they're going to begin the push north. And this is a lot slower as troops up here are a lot more determined, knowing that European aid could save the war. However, it's freaking Maine. There's not a lot of people up here. And the aid gets in. The aid gets into northern Maine. However, it's looking rough. And there's barely any troops left. The aid can't get anywhere else. So they fall. And basically, the aid cannot get into any of these areas. Any of these blue areas right here, especially Detroit. And, the Wisconsin, Minnesota, Chicago area. It can't get there. And even if it could get to these eastern areas, they're probably screwed anyway. So, yeah. So, European aid decides to try and go the other way. Problem with that. Russia says they will sink any and all European convoys that are deploying aid to one of Russia's, quote, enemies. So, yikes. European Union, not wanting to start a third world war, decides, alright, sorry, my boy Newsom, you're on your own. And Newsom is just like, well, fuck. So Newsom, he's just like, oh well, we tried, boys. Good attempt, but we are now screwed. So these governors are kind of just like, what the heck, man? Like, thought we had this, but it was very clear they did not have this. They were just about doomed from the start. And as the Trump forces begin to enclose on the major city of Boston, they capture it. Boston falls. An advance in Pennsylvania happens. And Philadelphia is cut off. Philadelphia lasts a while until it too falls. Delaware then falls. This part of Virginia is liberated. And New York City is all that remains. And eventually, after a lot of fierce fighting, New York City too falls. And now the entire eastern United States is under red control. Now we go over to this area, where Wagner has now been stationed to fight in the Battle of Detroit. Well, the battle lasts like no time at all with Wagner help, because they sent like not the entirety of the mercenary group, but a good chunk of it, like talking maybe 10k soldiers. And of course, Prigozhin is leading them. So under his, command, Detroit surrenders. And then an advance in Wisconsin to cut off Chicago is successful. Chicago is besieged until it is forced to surrender. And it is at this point that the governors of these states are kind of like, screw this. Gretchen Whitmer, she was, offed. And, Josh Shapiro, done. The new governor in New Jersey, done. York's governor, Andrew Cuomo, done. The Vermont governor, Maine's governor, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, done. All done. They do not have governors anymore. And so, Minnesota and Wisconsin, they still have their governors, but Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, also done. So, this is yikes. This is very big yikes. And it is at this point that the states just decide, you know what? Screw it, we're done. And they surrender. Tim Walz and the governor of Wisconsin, done. Well, Tim Walz and the Wisconsin governor might be spared since they surrendered beforehand. But knowing Trump, they're just, nope. No mercy. Anyways, now time to deal with the western United States, the last stronghold. Well, Nevada decides to pull a very interesting move, and the state legislature impeaches its own government. And in a special election, they actually get a new governor, which switches sides. Yeah, that happened. So, when states in your side are literally switching sides, that's when you know the war is lost. And so an invasion of Oregon happens, and they just immediately surrender, apparently. I don't know what you're talking about. Just a small invasion of the western United States. Yeah, everyone knows it's over. Oregon's governor, Washington's governor, they surrender. They're offed. The governor in Nevada that was impeached, pretty sure, he was probably offed too. But, oh well. He's probably handed over by the new governor. And California's Gavin Newsom is the only one that remains. Oh, what's that? Hawaii's still there? What's a Hawaii? Anyways. Yeah, California, it's yikes. Newsom is ordered the National Guard to fight to the death no matter what. So yeah, this is going to be like a Nazi Germany type. We will never surrender type thing. But here's the thing. They fall. There's no chance that California could win. They're just done. So, that's that. Donald Trump is victorious and has won himself another 4 years, maybe more. Like it's bad.